Hello everyone, this is Quaker from Next Gen Windows, and in this video I am going to decide whether you should buy the Surface 3 or the Surface Pro 3. Now in front of us right here we have the Surface 3. This is on MicrosoftStore.com, and this is the current pricings for each tier of the Surface 3. Now they have the 64GB with 2GB of RAM and Wi-Fi only model, and then they have the corresponding 128GB of storage and 4GB of RAM with Wi-Fi, and then each of those have a choice to have 4G LTE, which is not available yet. The key difference between the Surface 3 and the Surface Pro 3 is that the Surface 3 has a slightly worse processor, being an Atom processor. In fact, let me scroll down here so you guys can actually take a look at what the processor is. Now you see here, this is the processor, quad-core Atom X7 Z8700 processor with 2 megabytes of cache, 1.6 gigahertz with Intel burst technology up to 2.4 gigahertz. And one of the things here is it says Surface 3 offers more than 80% of the performance of the Surface Pro 3 with the Core i3 processor, according to PCMark. Now everything else pretty much is pretty much identical to the Surface Pro 3. And maybe except for the cameras, but I'll get back to that in a second. So it has everything else which is exactly the same. Only thing is it has a smaller screen, it's got a slightly worse resolution than the Surface Pro 3, and it's got a, it doesn't include the Surface Pen, but it has support for it. So it's got a 10.8 inch screen versus the 12.2 or 12 inch screen for the Surface Pro 3. So now we're going to go up here and I'll show you guys the Core i3 variant that they were talking about. So see here, the Core i3 variant of the Surface Pro 3 is $799, and it is 64 gigabytes of space and 4 gigabytes of RAM. Now personally, I would never go for anything less than 4 gigabytes of RAM in this day and age for a full PC. So for me, this 64 gigabyte of space with 4 gigabytes of RAM, to me is a no-go, because the price, $800 for only 64 gigabytes of space, which you'll probably use up very fast. That's a lot of money to be spending on a computer. Yes, you can buy an iPad with 64 gigabytes and it'll cost about the same thing. But if you're gonna, since this can run full-blown Windows applications, Win32 and Win64 applications, I would not personally recommend spending $800 on such little space. I would just bump it up one and go, pretty much this to me is the base model, the 128 Intel Core i5 1.9 gigahertz 4 gigabytes of RAM model. Now that right there is the baseline model that in my book I would highly recommend going for that one, because yes, it is $1,000, but it does have a 12-inch screen and it comes with a pen and it's got 128 gigabytes of space, Core i5, which you can run everything that you could possibly want except for like heavy hardcore tasks, and as well as 4 gigabytes of RAM. So if you go down here, you can see all the hinges, it bends perfectly, hinges, you know about that stuff if you're familiar with this channel. The difference here, comparing the Surface models, they say it's a perfect balance, blah blah blah, and ultimate in performance and versatility. Versatility. I cannot say that word. And the difference between size and weight, the Surface 3 is 10.8 inches, and the Surface Pro 3 is the 12-inch screen. And then the Surface 3 slightly weighs less and has a less resolution of 1920 by 1280 versus the Surface Pro 3, which has 2160 by 1440 resolution, and it's got a multi-position kickstand. And if you click here more, you can see what is included with the Surface 3 and Surface Pro 3. So you can see this one, the only difference is it includes Windows 8.1 regular, not 8.1 Pro, and it also includes 1 gigabyte of Office 365 Personal, which the Pro 3 does not. As well as the battery life. The battery life for the Pro 3 is about 9 hours that they say, depending on the tasks that you run, and the Surface 3 is about 10 hours, obviously depending on the task that you run. Now the reason why this battery life different is so vast is because, let's face it, if you have a faster processor and more memory and everything like that, it's going to take up more power, and that's what the reason. And more power equals less battery life. The more powerful your device is, the less length it's going to last throughout the day. So that's kind of the thing. And then the quad-core Atom processor versus the 4th generation Intel Core i3, i5, or i7. And then of course the difference between the inputs is the Surface 3 has a full-size USB 3.0 port, mini display port, micro SD card reader, headphone jack, cover port, which is the the type cover and the whatever other covers, and then it's got micro USB charging port. Now that's a key difference. It doesn't have its own proprietary charging port like the Pro 3 and all the other Pros in the line. This has its special micro USB charging port, which means if you have a phone that uses micro USB, which looks similar to Thunderbolt but it's not at all, you charge most phones with it. You can use any of those phone chargers depending on how many voltages it is to charge this tablet, which is amazing. Now the Surface Pro 3 has its own dedicated port, so I'm not even going to name what that is called because I'm not sure if there is a name, but it has pretty much the same other everything else is pretty much the same for those two. So that is the difference there, and you get the different size screen, and you get the different battery life and the different processor, and you get a micro USB charging port on the Surface 3, which I feel like on the Surface Pro 4, when it comes out eventually, it will have micro USB charging as well, because I feel like they're moving that to be the standard instead of their own proprietary ports. Now, going back to the Surface 3 here, there's a few things you got to note before you even think about purchasing a Surface 3 is, one, do you want a pen and do you want a type cover? Now let me hit buy now, and if you want a pen, that's extra, and that's going to be about $30-ish extra, and if you want a type cover, that's $129 extra. So if you want those, you're going to see above roughly around like $160 extra cost to your price. So if you're paying for the 128 4GB of RAM model non-LTE, you're going to pay roughly $760 for that one for the Surface 3. But if you want the Surface Pro 3, the ideal model for that one being, let's go up here, 128GB, is $1,000. That does not include the type cover for that either, and that will be another $129 to add to that, so that will be about $1,129 or $1,130 about. So that's about the price difference that you'll be getting. So it's all about down to preference. Do you need the power of the Core i5? Do you need that power, or do you not mind just getting this tablet / laptop replacement to simply just browse the web and check your emails, type up papers, and do maybe light tasks? If you play games, I've seen some people at my college, she was playing The Sims 4 on it, she was playing Mass Effect 3 on the Surface Pro 3, and it looked to run pretty smooth. She was enjoying herself. She even played online with a friend next to her, and I can't see someone doing that with the Surface 3. That's more of light tasks like browsing the web, typing emails, typing up papers and stuff like that. You won't be doing any programming on this device. But other than that, the battery life is good and everything else seems pretty good. So it's up to your preference. Are you a heavy user or are you a light user? And that's pretty much the difference between the Surface 3 and the Surface Pro 3. If you have any questions or you have any if you need to decide which device you want to get, let me know in the comment section below. I've broken it down as easy as I could about which device is. Peace.